And joining me now this morning to continue on the discussion of funding basic education in Nigeria, we will now be hearing from the horse's mouth as we have in the studio the Executive Secretary of the Universal Basic Education Fund, Dr. Hamid Bobboyi. Good morning, Doctor. Welcome to Daybreak.
Thank you very much for having me.
Doctor, you saw the explainer that Ibrahim Ismail did. Perhaps a good place to start from would be the universal basic education operates in a way that allows, for counterpart funding between the federal government and state governments. Exactly. Where are we in terms of that?
No, thank you very much for asking the question. We were with the Senate Committee on Basic Education on Monday. And I think it's where we gave a lot of the statistics that the explainer is. We are the ones who really give those statistics. But I think I need to give an explanation.
All right.
The accessing matching grant by states, the amount that, the total amount that people are giving is not really what we call unaccessed funds.
Okay.
In the sense that our grant, the 2%, is not a block grant. Even though in the law it's called a block grant, it's not a block grant where, okay, get the 2% of the Consolidated Revenue Fund of, about 250 billion. As at the beginning of end of 2023, beginning of 2024. The problem is that these are monthly releases, and states do not access this money the current year. So 2024, hardly would you find any state that is accessing that particular amount. They want the entire money to accumulate up to December. So that's the reason why the current year, 2024, whatever has accumulated within that particular year, we don't call it unaccessed funds. Because they are not even ripe for access. Now, we gave the Senate Committee also the unaccessed funds. That's the funds from maybe 2021, 2022, 2023, and up to 2023, isn't it, that were not accessed. And the total, if people could remember, was 28 billion. There are few states that are still struggling to make sure that they access. So I think we need to be careful in the picture we provide.
Indeed, Doctor, and it's good that you're mentioning this because, quite a number of those have this opinion that a lot of state governments are shying away from accessing this grant.
It's not entirely true. It's not entirely true. There are some state governments that have about three states that may have this particular problem. But even the problem, again, you have to go back to see its genesis. There were those states that received a lot of money during the Paris Club reimbursement. You remember what the federal government did at that time was to any state that had not paid its matching grant, amount was deducted directly and put into the account of UBEC. And I think having gotten there are some states that had not paid for something, other had 10 billion and so on and so forth. And I think they took quite some time to use these monies. But the law is very clear on this. If you do not come to account for the previous allocation, you cannot receive the next allocation.
And how has that been going?
And you see, that's the real issue sometimes with some of the states that have gotten a lot of money. They have to come back. And it's not just that, even if they want to access, we don't know, you cannot access because the law will not allow you, it has not allowed us to give you money unless and until you can account for the monies that you had received. I think the problem is only with very few states so far now. The total amount that is there from, I think, from the entire, within our entire, balance sheet that we have up to 2023, the state that about maybe is it 8 states that are having some problems, but the real problem is with 3 states that seems to be stuck because also of having a lot of money earlier through the Paris, if you remember, through the Paris Club, isn't it? A reimbursement program that took place. So let's understand, please, let's put things in perspective. And when I was presenting that to the Senate committee, I requested the press, please understand these figures. We are giving you the entire figures. Because if, for example, you have 250 billion as the total allocation to UBEC, 50% of it goes for matching grant. And that 50% now, isn't it, amounts to about, isn't it, 100 and what? Isn't it 125 or so? So if you take this 125, that's what happened, and then added the 28 billion. That's how now they calculated the out-of-school children. I think which is not a fair way of understanding this particular problem.
Yes, well, that's one way of looking at it, of course, Doctor. But yes, despite all of this, we also understand that the challenges of not accessing these funds in time and also not meeting up with the requirements, to access this fund, as well as using these funds when necessary, might also be impeding access, to quality basic education to young Nigerian people. So I want you to talk about the implications of all of this.
No, the implications are enormous. The implications are enormous, in the sense that, for example, you have about 5 billion with UBEC at the beginning of the year of 2024, and isn't it now we are in November? Isn't it going to December
of 2024?
That money must have been devalued by what, 50%, 100%?
The dollar.
If you look at it, isn't it? Because we are even losing in a way, isn't it, devaluing, the very amount that were there, isn't it, initially. If this money had been put into use at that particular time, it would have gotten double the infrastructure. So that's the reason why we had, part of the discussions, isn't it, we have been having at the Ministry of Education, part of the discussion that we have been having with the Senate and with the House, is that what conditions now in the new amendment, the amendment, isn't it, of the UBE Act,
yes,
what conditions do we really need to add to ensure that states are given a particular time period to access? If they don't access, that money would now be put in a general pool that will be redistributed to those states that need them. Because the federal government cannot sit, isn't it, provide funding, and that funding, isn't it, is not being accessed. If you look at it again, also our worry is not only access. You can access the money, put it in your account, but it takes also a long time to be utilized. Again, it still depreciates.
Indeed.
So we have those, the new amendment that, the amendment of the Act will have to take care of, those particular aspects.
I want you to expatiate on this amendment, especially as it relates to funding UBEC. Currently, is it 2% of the consolidated revenue fund?
Exactly.
And that would amount to roughly around 250 billion, like you mentioned. Well, Doctor, if you consider the fact that best practices, demands around 20% of a nation's budget to go into the education sector, which would provide some real funding for UBEC if, of course, performed optimally. What are these impediments you would think that amending the UBEC Act will address, especially relating to funding?
No, the funding aspects, I've already, begun to tell you the.
Of course, and that's why I want you to elaborate more.
The issue of the conditions that I think those states that are going to access. But let's go back to the quantum of the resources itself. Unfortunately, Nigeria, compared to our even neighbors within the West African sub-region, we are not putting as much resources as we should into our basic education subsector. Many countries, in terms of the percentages of GDP, that they are putting, far exceed what Nigeria is putting. I remember when we had a case, when I think somebody asked me that, look here, my school is in trouble in a particular state. And I said to, he's a senior officer within the system. And I said to him, sir, okay, let's send people to go and look at this school, but understand that it's not the responsibility of UBEC, because UBEC is already providing money to the state to take care. But let me tell you what the state can do with the money that that was being provided. That particular year, we were giving 1.5 billion. This was about 3-4 years back, isn't it? And the state will bring, isn't it? 1.5 billion. Now you had only 3 billion. This 3 billion, I said to him, we went and assessed your school, and we found that it needed 250 million naira to be rehabilitated, so that if you go to holidays on Christmas, you'll not be stoned. Now Adamawa had only, the total amount is spending on basic education was 3 billion. Of course, it may spend on teacher salaries, because that's, again, the bulk of the spending for most states where the problems are. Then I said to him, how many schools can, 3 billion take care of, when I assure you 50% of the schools will require the 250 million that your school also requires. So at the end of the day, I said to him, 250, if you divide it into, it's 333. You can only renovate 12 schools. So the level of dilapidation will continue unless we put in resources. And I think that's the key aspect of the current amendment, where the government is realizing, yes, we need to put in more money into this particular process. But in putting in more money, we need to also, again, call for more responsiveness and accountability from the partners that we are trying to help. And the federal government is helping the states in that particular regard. It's not taking over basic education.
Well, Doctor, these conversations continue, but then we're going to go on a quick breather, and when we return, the program continues in earnest. Do stay with us. So, Doctor, now, if the current number of out-of-school children, according to UNICEF, is around 18 million, I understand that UBEC is doing, a lot in order to ensure access to primary education across different states. But this figure seems to be increasing by the day. Perhaps you can speak to us to specifics, about what should be done to address this issue.
No, it has been one of the most serious problems as far as the basic education subsector is concerned. The figures themselves are also, isn't it, they are up for grabs, in the sense that all of them are like computer simulations or estimates and so on and so forth. UBEC goes after every 3 years to the field to do a census. And it was the initial census that we did for the ages of 6 to 11 that gave us the 10.2 million that is used for that particular age group of primary education.
Indeed.
But don't forget that under the current dispensation of SDGs, basic education is not reckoned just at the level of junior secondary school. It has also gone to the level of senior secondary school. So I kept on explaining this. I think it was here that I first explained it about about 1.5 years ago. That what UNESCO, is even UNESCO, isn't it? What UNESCO was telling the world about the 20 million, that people said, oh, how did it jump from 10.2 million to 20 million? It has not jumped. It has always been there. If you take the primary, because our focus in Nigeria for quite some time had been on that segment of 6 to 11, because if you cannot get these children into school at this stage, it becomes quite a big problem for the nation, because the movement of these kids into this level, and then ultimately their own progression into the other levels, will be jeopardized. At the level of junior secondary school, what UNESCO is telling us is that we have about 5.6 or so, and a similar number also in senior secondary school. But the figures, the total figures, have to now be put together, because basic education ends at senior secondary school based on the on the new definition provided by SDGs.
Right.
The MDG were the one that was stopping at this. So that's how those numbers have increased. It had always been a problem. It has been aggravated, if you remember very well, particularly in the northeast and other places, isn't it, by the insurgencies. And these insurgencies are not abating. They are not abating, isn't it? We have quite a lot of other challenges in other parts of the country where children even fear to go to school.
Indeed.
We have still, again, grappling with the Almajiri problem, where our children, isn't it, go to the Islamic schools. It's wonderful, isn't it? They go learn the Quran and other things. But in the century, in the era we are living, they also have to come to the conventional school to be able to understand what the world is about, also to be able, isn't it, to function effectively within the economy of the 21st century.
Okay, go ahead, Doctor.
Yes. So, again, the third element is where we have the girl-child problem. And girls also constitute, isn't it, even if they go to primary school, by the time they enter JSS 1, JSS 2, it's like a massacre, isn't it? They disappear.
Fizzle out.
Fizzle out. Fizzle out, either to go and marry or for whatever other reasons, isn't it? They fizzle out. So these are areas of challenges. I think that for quite some time, with the international partners that we have, with other partners within the country, isn't it? And even with the SDG programs, I think efforts have been put to make sure that we can get children into school and we can retain them.
No, go ahead. So still talking about the quality of education, Doctor. I mean, the explainer mentioned that Nigeria needs around 100,000 teachers, to effectively run the primary education sector. But quite recently, I understand that UBEC had started transitioning gradually from the STEM education system to STEAM, which accounts for science, technology, education, arts, and mathematics. Perhaps you could provide more details, on how that's going.
No, thank you. Having again looked at the issue of the out-of-school children, I think the other key challenge had always been the issue of learning poverty. During the COVID period, again, we lost teachers. About 35% of our teachers just disappeared. Many of them retired. They were not replaced by the state governments. Fortunately, many of the state governments are now replacing teachers. They are bringing teachers on board. And even the current policy of the federal government is also trying to focus on teachers, not only in terms of teacher development, but also how do you support the states in the area of teacher recruitment. Without the teacher, it becomes very difficult, isn't it, for us to make progress on that particular aspect. The second aspect, again, is that even with all the teachers, with renovating our classrooms that we have, with the blackboards and the chalk that are provided, can it effectively help us to move into the 21st century? And the answer is no, it cannot. We need to look at where the world is going. We need to appreciate that we need to up our game, where the issue of smart education, the issue of the digital platforms that we need to create for our children to learn like their colleagues are learning, even in Nigeria in private schools, and also outside the world. The issue of the new emerging fields in the area of artificial intelligence, in the area of robotics, in the area of, math and, particularly strengthening math, engineering and technologies that can help them function effectively in this century and compete effectively with their own colleagues. And that's what I think led UBEC to look at what has been going on and to begin to encourage states. Don't forget that we don't run schools, we don't have teachers. We intervene and try to encourage and try to push states to move to certain directions. And we feel that we need to move in the direction of smart education in Nigeria. And that's what led to the development of the Digital Resource Center that we have here for teacher training. Because even if you buy all the gadgets, we have been buying computers for how long in this country? In schools. Every school, will have a computer center. But has it helped us? So we need to see how we can have an integrated approach in terms of providing the digital resources, but at the same time making sure that we train the teachers who could take full advantage of the digital resources to make the difference that we require.
No.
The DRC is supposed to be for that. But at the same time, we felt also that we needed to go and have model smart schools that can serve as examples. Models are always expensive, isn't it? But at the same time, isn't it? We need to have them so that if people are interested in going that direction, they can look at it, isn't it, and say, yeah, that's the way to go. So we have almost completed that particular program, isn't it? In each and every state of the federation.
36.
In the 36 and FCT. The FCT one is just kicking off, isn't it? It kicked off about a month ago in Karshi. The DRC is here in Kadokuchi. And I think many of the schools have started. A few are still, isn't in the process of being completed. And interestingly, many state governments are coming on board. And I'm very glad to see states like Enugu, states like Niger, states like, isn't it, Lagos and others, isn't really, isn't pushing hard in that particular direction.
All right. Well, Dr. Hamid, thank you so much for being a part of the program. Unfortunately, that's so much we can tell you. Another time, definitely, we'll be talking about, the status of these model centers that you mentioned.
Thank you.
As we provide more details on them. It's been a pleasure. We've been speaking with Dr. Hamid Bobboyi, the Executive Secretary of the Universal Basic Education Commission, talking about financing basic education in Nigeria. We'll go on a quick break now, and when we return, it will be time for the newspaper review segment of the program. Stay with us.